But the point is, you see, as far as I'm concerned, metaphysics, which is this grand word, is what underpins our worldview. As far as I can see, metaphysics is about what the universe is really like and what we are really like and how we should fit into the universe. So it underpins science and it underpins morality and it underpins our entire view of the world.
We can't speak about agriculture without reference to ideas about what constitutes humanity, bodies, kinship and well-being.
The prevailing worldview says that we have a perfect right to manipulate the structure of the world exactly the way we want to do it for our own benefit. There's no reason to do anything else, but it's only stuff, it doesn't care, and animals don't care, so we can muck about with them as well.
Moving from something which is maybe anthropocentric, maybe human obsessed, maybe everything is just our resource to do with what we want, and there's maybe somewhere to go that's more ecocentric, which is about the unity of being.
Science is of course materialist because science is very good at handling things that have to do with direct observation and with maths, so it's bound to be very materialist. It doesn't have to be logically positivist.
Among Amazonian peoples, bodies, kinship, food and cultivation are all irreducibly intertwined, and the health of the earth depends on the maintenance of the positive, virtuous relationships between them all.
Besides being anthropocentric, also very, very competitive, according to the modern worldview, we don't actually need to worry about other people either, because really we're in competition with them.
Respecting that unity is about respecting the nature of all things, and what I couldn't get my head round was what the nature of humans was, and surely we needed to respect that.
Local people need to be recognised as essential constituents of natural habitats and landscapes as part of it.
Nature is far more cooperative than it is competitive, and if that were not the case, actually life would fall apart. Life would be quite impossible.
Food's a social construct. What we eat is determined socially, what we eat is determined politically.
The community aspects of food, sharing and enjoying what food brings us. It's not just something that gives us energy, it's not just a fuel.
In other words, progress, which leads to prosperity, is the process of taking the fabric of the earth and our fellow creatures and turning them into money by treating them as commodities.
The agribusiness companies and quite a lot of the scientists that are in their payroll, indirectly or directly, are saying there is no alternative but further intensification.
If, on the other hand, you speak to economists such as Vandana Shiva or Raj Patel, or for that matter, plantation workers in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean or Latin America, those people who are producing the food, much of the food that arrives on our supermarket shelves, I've come to the conclusion that the current model that we have doesn't have the social, economic or biological foundations to support today's population, let alone an additional 3 billion people over the next 50 years.
Out of this comes the most incredible injustice. People, which is manifest, for example, in the suicides among farmers, among other things.
Most farmers produce commodities. We have a farmer who lives next door to us who gives us beef. Well, he doesn't give us, he sells it quite expensively actually, but he sells us beef when we don't have enough of our own to take to our butchery. We gave him a steak from one of his beasts. It was the first time he'd eaten a steak from one of his beasts. For the last 50 years they've gone away in a lorry and he's never seen them again, and he's gone to Tesco's to buy his food.
Now it seems to me that if you had this view of life, the transcendence and mystery and all the other things, and reverence for respect for other creatures and reverence for the world as a whole, we simply wouldn't dream of farming the way we now farm. We wouldn't treat animals as commodities. We'd be find it obscene. We wouldn't be hacking down rainforests in order to grow a bit more soil in order to make more pigs.
Yeah, about think global, eat local, trying to make sense of that. What does that actually mean, and where are we at the moment? What could we do about it?
That what we actually need to feed the world is mixed, labour-intensive, small to medium-sized farms. This is what biology tells you. This isn't ideology, this isn't nostalgia, this is what the biology tells you.
The more diverse a system you have, the more resilience you have.
I think it's at this time, more than any other, that we need to demonstrate that that small, mixed, diverse family farms represent an alternative, represent an ideal to work towards, and that we have the young people willing to pursue a life on the land.
If you want to produce a lot of food from a small area, you'd have a lot more small farms and you'd produce it in a much smarter way.
We need more trust between government agencies, scientists, farmers and local rural communities. This requires a shift from a protectionist, expert-based approach to one of participation in land management.
So we need right-scale local processing, and in among all that, I think we need region-to-region trading.
Importantly, what we wanted to do was to demonstrate an alternative, actively demonstrate an alternative to the more industrial model of food production that had kind of eroded our community, our agricultural community.
And it's 175 acres. The majority of it is down to a pasture lay, which we have cattle and sheep on, and then the pigs then move on to that, sort of break up the ground, and after that we do arable crops and replant the lay. There's also a 6-acre veg patch, there's soft fruits being planted, there's an orchard where the chickens are, there's lots of new woodland where we keep other poultry. It's a very, very complicated farm, but it's amazingly full of life. A recent bird walk found, I think, 36 species in 2 hours.
She was saying she works in Benin, where the farmers there have gone down the cash crops route and they've put in a lot of chemical fertilizers on their ground, a lot of pesticides. There's been a lot of illness as a result, as you can expect, but basically their ground is knackered, right? And they're now, of course, reintroducing organic farming methods. Yields have doubled, they're getting the kids to school, right? So for me, that's a pretty live example of why business as usual is probably not the right way forward for Benin, and I'm not sure it's the right way forward for Scotland either.
I made the decision a couple of years ago to attempt to create a livelihood for myself within my local community using the skills that I'd learned through working on other people's farms.
It seems to me that we're not going to go back to a primarily agrarian environment, but most people are going to live in the cities. So how do you actually connect people who live in cities, people's farms, and how do you get a food economy that benefits producers and links consumers really as co-producers? And the first thing you have to do, it seems to me, is you have to get people to treat their food budget as a core spend, not a marginal discretionary activity.
It's also about food communities and about making the links between people and the food that they eat.
Now, community supported agriculture, or CSA, is a relatively new model here in the UK. It's a lot bigger in the States and elsewhere in Europe. But it's a model of subscription farming where customers become members of the farm, members of a scheme, and commit to buy a share of the year's produce for a year in advance.
Most importantly, an economic benefit to local food, because you get the local economic multiplier. Actually, if money changes hands within a local area, less of it leaks out to Tesco shareholders or multinational companies.
We are aware that we're part of a much bigger picture. I believe, personally, the next sort of 30 to 40 years is going to be pivotal in the struggle really to create the resilient food supply of the future, and I believe that it's our generation, those of us getting into farming now, my generation, who are going to be at the front lines of that struggle.
If only we did things properly, we could actually feed ourselves easily, we could provide enough good food for everybody forever, and we could do it without wrecking the rest of the world.